Okay, hello and welcome. I want you to repeat after me. I will sell this solution today. I'm just kidding. You're engineers, right? That sort of stuff makes your skin crawl. So what do we think of? We think of a salesperson. Oops, sorry. What do we think of when we think of a salesperson? I'm staying at a hotel and there's a sales summit that's going on. Boy, when those salespeople get into that elevator, they're chit-chatting with people they don't know. How you doing, buddy? And they're pretty hyped up, right? Tell me some more. What else are your impressions of someone who's in sales? Used car salesman.
Yeah, I'll just say
Describe the personality here.
questionable ethics.
Yeah.
Questionable ethics. That's right.
Sell at any cost.
Sell at any cost. I heard that at lunch yesterday. Yeah. Maybe even dishonest at times.
High pressure.
High pressure. Yep. Yeah.
Driven, fast
They're under
paced.
the gun to make it all work. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Driven, fast paced, move quickly.
I like to think optimistic. What else do we think of when we think of a salesperson? Even think like Myers-Briggs, right? If you're coaching someone, oh, I see you. You know, you might be a future salesperson.
Likable.
What do you see in? Likable. Okay.
Extrovert.
You must be in sales. Extrovert, right? Extrovert must be one of the biggest things about being sales and what we think of. This dishonesty question as well. We had a great discussion at lunch yesterday. I learned a lot just kind of workshopping some of this. Someone said, even when they're not trying to be dishonest, like Rob said in the back, that pressure can make slightest bit of overpromise. Those overpromises we find sometimes we engineers, right? We've got to kind of clean all that up at the end. We've got to bring it back to reality. So how does that contrast with what we think of with an engineering persona? Let's again think through. Oh, you know, you're a future engineer. How can you spot that?
No BS.
Okay, they're very straightforward. Awesome.
You're an engineer.
Zeros and ones, right? Good and bad here. Yeah.
Pessimist.
Love it. Pardon?
Pessimist.
Pessimist. Yes. I've experienced that on the sort of other side of the table for sure.
Prefer to call it.
Frequently an introvert.
Frequently an introvert. I think that's a great contrast. Thanks for that, Paul. If classic sales personality is maybe perhaps a bit more extroverted, the classic engineer personality may be a bit more introverted. Let's think about some of the greatest sales and engineer people that we've ever heard of in our entire lives. Who are the champions of kind of this weird, intersection of this Venn diagram?
Steve
of
Jobs.
Engineers who sell. Steve Jobs comes to the top of the list. Do we think that we're in his building here? Do we think that he was dishonest? Do we think that was he on a noble and passionate pursuit, or was he kind of full of it? Right? No, he was clearly very mission driven. Or let's also think of perhaps even Bill Gates, right, and the work that Bill and Melinda have done in Africa and across the world. Are these good people? Are these likable people who taking their engineering skills and combining them? I think these are some of the most extraordinary people ever. And today what we're going to discuss is kind of how if you're a bit more in that engineer seat. I talked to a few of you that run your own business, so mainly what you're doing is building solutions all day long, every day. You're not yucking it up at the bar with strangers. You're trying to piece together and to grow a business. What we want to do for sort of that avatar today is to try to kind of help move it a little bit forward. We're all going to work together to do that. We're going to have a discussion. We'll have a few interactive exercises. Some of us are a little bit more often in the sales side. So what we're going to try to convince you of is come on in. The water's nice. Jump on in. It's a great place to be. And I believe that it's also an incredible skill set for the development of your career. Okay? Should be fun. People don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. Is the mall on the holidays a happy place? Is it an energized place where people are feeling good? My mom calls it when she goes out shopping for the family around that time of year, she calls it, I accomplished a lot, right? I acquired a lot. There's a lot of information gathering. There's a lot of decision making. And when she's got some bags full and a coffee in her hand, she's leaving that mall feeling really good. Hopefully, during that process, she's been able to consult with a few experts who helped her on the journey. But I love this quote, and one of my 3 mentors said this to me all the time: is people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. Sometimes he would say that even in kind of a meeting debrief. Young man, remember, there's a way that you can push someone where all of a sudden you get that feeling in the room. Even if you're a bit more of an introvert and you're not always tuned into the feelings in the room, you can probably still feel it when things get perhaps a bit awkward. And that gives us that yuck factor that none of us like. So we're going to talk about that today. We'll talk about my journey of learning to sell. I'm all in for it now. I'll give you a little checklist because I know that engineers love checklists. Okay, so I'm throwing you a bone here. I'll give you a framework because I know that engineers like frameworks. It helps us make sense of the world. You're going to take both of those and you're going to throw them out afterwards, right? You need to know it and then you need to forget it. It's that kind of thing. I'll walk you through a value analysis exercise as well, and then we'll have a few takeaways. Okay? The 4-step framework, which we're going to step through. What's the problem? What's the solution? What's the pitch? What's the approval, right? What's the problem? What's the solution? What's the pitch? And how are we going to get started? So those are 4 things that I'm going to repeat a few times so we can kind of just commit to memory. And then hopefully that will solidify your sales engineering game going forward. My name is Bill. I've got 4 kids. We live in the Midwest. And we actually lived for a few years in East Africa, in Rwanda. I followed my wife there because she was a lawyer at a big firm in Chicago, and she wanted to pivot her career into human rights. So she pursued a fellowship with an organization called International Justice Mission. She was doing really hard work and super proud of the work that she was able to do there. Amazing story was that we moved over when our oldest was just 6 months old. And there's my second son, Paul, on Amanda's back. And this amazing story was I met this American guy who was helping run this large coffee exporter, a trading company. And we didn't even have a car at the time. It was a short walk from our house. And I mentioned what I did. I mentioned the keyword FileMaker. And his head nearly popped off. He said, I need you tomorrow. I had been working with Saline Consulting for 13 years at that point. I was the very first intern back even before Saline, and I was one of the directors of the business at the time. So I called Bob and I said, hey, I got something in Africa, but I'd like to grow a team around it. And Bob said, awesome. I've got your back. Let me know how I can help. That's not our business. So you go on and start a new business here and see if you can build that up. And continues to be one of my 3 sales mentors today. I'm very, very grateful for that. We call our model Upshore. We're trying to make a positive social impact. And we've got a hybrid team. I'll show you a photo here in a minute of folks here in the States. And we've got a teammate in from Dubai for the conference. So we're grateful. Very much thank you to Bob, to Alex from Claris, to my friend Jake from Capital One, Bev, Betsy, Heather, and Amanda. It was a real privilege kind of pulling all of this together for you. Here's a quick visual of our team. Fun to see them up, and very grateful again for the help that was put in by lots of folks on this. My teammate Sonia built those 2 FileMaker solutions completely by herself. She's one of our most outstanding developers, so it's pretty fun. She lives in Rwanda. When I started out in sales, I thought, yeah, would drag me down to the University of Chicago for conversations and over to Citibank downtown. It felt kind of exciting. It felt like a great privilege to be getting to kind of sit in those rooms. I have distinct memories a couple of times that I was just coming out of engineering school, and I'm like, why are we talking so much? Can't we just give them a price? Can't we just say, here's the money, just sort of take it or leave it? Let's shortcut this process. Bob would sometimes say things like, we're not even talking to the buyer yet, right? We have to sit in conversation, welcome, and have to be able to kind of sustain those conversations. I was having dinner after the keynote with a good friend, Jim Medema, runs Surefoot, and he said, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped him, is that having that ability to be fully present and locked in, eye to eye, in a rich, sustained selling conversation is one of the things that he's able to bring, to really, truly listen to someone without checking the phone, right? Just pen and paper. Tell me the story of how your business got to be at this point. Having the willingness and sort of the personal gravitas to sit there and listen to that story. When you just want to build the darn thing, right? I already know what to do. So part of it, I think, is patience. I do think that that's a big part of what I had to learn, particularly in my first few years. Bob also reminded me always that we're going to give you a framework today. I'll give you a checklist today. We can't framework or checklist our leads, right? They'll know. They see you sort of doing math in the back of your head and start to introduce some wiggly feelings. So we have to adapt our selling process to the customer's buying process. We always have to adapt our selling process to the customer's buying process. Otherwise, they feel like they're sold instead of buying. I had a second sales mentor who's a Canadian guy named Dan McKittrick, and he and I were in Africa at the same time. He brought the fun. He brought the energy. He always kept me laughing. And he kept other people laughing. He might have been more that kind of that elevator person that wants to hang out, that extreme extrovert. We would fly over to Tanzania or up to Uganda and over to Kenya and have these conversations. And the magic and the brilliance of what Dan was doing that I came to respect over those years is that he would get people to listen up and he would get people to really honestly share, particularly about their problems. Those of you that have been selling for a long, long time, you know that's maybe not what they're going to tell you in the first 10 minutes, right? You have to be able to establish a certain rapport, be able to get access to the information that you need as an engineer to get your zeros and ones lined up to actually build a solution that solves the underlying problem. Sometimes access to that information takes a bit of time. It takes trust to get that to open up. And Dan was amazing with that. And also, he helped me have a good time and listen up a little bit too. Stephen Galler, I moved back to Cincinnati, Ohio, and Stephen was, I think, a leader and executive even back in the day when Claris was called Claris. And he happened to be sort of semi-retired in Cincinnati and said, hey, yeah, I'd love to hop along and join you for a few critical conversations. And what Stephen taught me was that nothing happens in a professional selling conversation by accident. Everything has a game plan, and everything should be, I don't want to say orchestrated, but it should be kind of rehearsed and intentional. That just sort of the improv and even down to the body language. Stephen was incredibly perceptive. Sometimes we'd leave a conversation, I'd say, hey, how did that go? And he would pick up on all sorts of things that me as an engineer, or perhaps even a little nervous or a little amped up or something, he would be sitting there back in his chair, watching, listening. He was in like this scientific mode. They're giving us inputs that are beyond what they're just saying. We need to be intaking all that. So thank you to those three folks. I got all in with selling. I had this funny story that happened. My grandfather started a business many, many years ago. He came out of engineering school, and they were a manufacturer's sales rep for boilers, for industrial boilers. My uncle came home from flying helicopters in Vietnam and took over the business. My cousin runs it today. Stopped by in Pennsylvania, and I noticed my grandfather's book was filled with sales books and engineering books. And I said, wow, isn't that so cool? And it had his handwriting in the sales books. And I said, okay, clearly this was a guy who studied and had to learn that side of the trade in order to grow this, this small family-run business. I'm in. I can do this. Even though some of it's uncomfortable, I can get into, listening to podcasts. I can do some of those sort of cheesy things like, reading a sales book. And I've got some references in here, some of which I believe are sort of Claire's books that like kind of come to the top of the stacks when they're bringing on new sales reps too. And I can say that I believe we've had good results. I remember some of those early days of being in a critical conversation in Kenya, and it didn't quite go forward. And I believe that our metrics are showing we're having about a 2x gain since we said, okay, let's study this like any other science. If I'm going to study APIs, I can study sales. It's just a skill set. And even if I'm a bit more introverted, this is a very valuable skill set, and together we can all do more. Also very proud that teammates Heather and Hassan, it's crazy. Sometimes they're having wholesaling conversations and onboarding new clients completely without me. And so they're able to take on this process, and I think that's a unique step in my sales journey. I mentioned post-meeting reviews. Engineering for me was always more exciting than biology or chemistry because you got to go to the lab, right? You got to go take it out and try it out. Let's build the car and let's go see how fast it can go. Engineering was about doing things. And I believe sales is too. You may have seen as well as a professional classical singer for many years. And I know there's other classical musicians in the room as well. And that ability to say, hey, how was that? To take feedback. I believe that almost every selling conversation should have that minute in the car, that little minute debrief. Don't just hang up the Zoom. You say, what did you see? What did you hear? How are we doing? How can we improve? Sometimes the most valuable lessons are even after that painful loss. You've invested 10 hours, maybe 15, maybe more, and it slipped away. That's not sunk cost. That's gold. 15 hours is gold if you can do the work to extract it. Is it a big enough problem in the first place? Did they actually have a significant pain point? These are some of the types of questions you can be asking. Is there a competing opportunity? Sometimes they don't even tell you. This is priority 5 on their list. There's an amazing article called When Coffee and Kale Eat. Coffee and kale. Right? They have nothing to do with each other, but sometimes in a grocery store, the selection is, ooh, coffee, or no, I need some kale. So oftentimes your competition is the status quo. It's doing nothing. It's paper and pen. You're not competing against other vendors out there. Your competition is sometimes, hey, we need to go buy that new building, or we need this solution. So those are the types of things that you're going to discern through your selling journey. And I left a few other questions in here for you that are kind of simple or similar. I think one of the key concepts that I always go back to with why sales and why it works for me is that ultimately I believe that we're helping people along their buying journey. In my grandfather's books, it was hilariously dated when I flipped through. It was talking about selling the icebox, talking about Willie Loman, the death of the salesman. But it also talked about Reconstruction. It talked about after the Great Depression, about after World War II, how are we as a country going to move forward? And there's a gap in confidence. Sometimes we as a people need that salesperson in the room to help us sift through the information and to move forward with confidence. The icebox was a huge breakthrough for the average American household. People needed to buy those things, even though at the time it felt like, is this another encyclopedia? Is this another, knife that I don't need? And sure, so there's, of course, a lot of that in sales, but I believe that there's a nobility to what we're trying to do in trying to help people innovate and move forward. Again, a lot of times our competition is the status quo. It's doing nothing. And I typically am pretty fearless and gung-ho and perhaps a bit optimistic with trying to help move forward. Yes? Question.
This slide right here,
Yes.
when you're talking to an engineering crowd,
Yes.
sales debugging.
How to debug your sales code. That's brilliant. Love that. Thank you for that. Great. So in conclusion from this kind of setup here is I really had three types of findings. You know, it is a lot like engineering. It can be very highly structured and ordered and consultative. Think of a great engineered bridge or a tall building. There's flexibility, right? And that's a key part of having a great engineering design and engineering a great sales process. I believe that sales can be purpose-driven. And the last thing I would say here is that whether you like it or not, everybody sells all day, every day. We're even selling and trying to influence outcomes even in our families, with our kids, or our spouse, or our friends. So we all have to, if we want to make a positive impact, we all have to kind of get acquainted with this material, whether or not it's something that we're going to grow to love. As we bridge into the second section here, one prevailing analogy that I'd like to draw that I think will capture that element of nobility and capture that element of science is the analogy, the metaphor of a medical physician. Picture going in to have a conversation with your doctor. You don't want them to move too quickly, do you? And just say, hey, here, take 2 of these. I don't need to know the rest of the details. Right? My head is a little stuffy. They cut you off, right? Because they're so eager to get that solution. Also, don't want to be frameworked. You don't want their head in a checklist, right? Maybe they just got out of medical school and they're flipping through the DSM. That's not a great sign if you're talking to someone that wants to become your trusted advisor. So we're going to get into frameworks. We're going to get into checklists next. And the prevailing analogy that I'd like to continue to draw to elevate the role of the salesperson is that you're like a good doctor. You're going to listen well, and you've got your framework memorized so deeply that you can go through your diagnostics without them ever knowing. Does that make sense? Awesome. Good. So again, here's the framework in a flyover. It's about problem, solution, presentation, and approval. Sometimes we're floating, we're bobbing and weaving, we're going out of order, but we sort of need to fill all 4 of these buckets, and you'll see that in the checklist in a second. We need to make sure that we have a size of the problem. Alex from Claire's told me when reviewing this, that's the number one thing. Make sure we capture that business objective. Sort of like Monopoly, you can't, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Right? Solutionizing, ideating can be a lot of fun. We need to ground it in the business objective. During step 2, we'll be ideating. We'll have a couple of different alternatives, perhaps, that we're weighing through. Step 3, we're picking a winner, and we need to be a trusted advisor and to make a recommendation. You'd hate to leave your doctor and have them say, well, you know, I'm still not sure. You could take that medicine, or you could try this therapy. At some point, you do need them to weigh in and to reassure you and to bring some confidence. And let's be honest, sometimes the confidence is not fully there about the course of treatment, but you have to pick a winner. And that's one of the fun parts of sales. And then we got to get specific with how we're going to get started, how we're going to get buy-in from others, how we're going to be successful. Without further ado, we're going to jump in here to the checklist a little bit. We're going to be having a scientific pursuit. We're going to be asking great questions throughout our sales process, and that will tell us how our process is mapping onto the customer process. Bob really liked this. He said, having a list of really good, juicy questions, and maybe if others have a few of these, bold questions, powerful questions. How did the idea for this initiative come to be a priority for you at this time? Take me back. Tell me the story. What do other people feel about this initiative that you're thinking about? What alternative solutions are you considering? It's a dangerous question. I don't want to hear the answer to that, right? I don't want to hear that you're also talking about this or that or the other. But we need to bring it into the room. We need to have enough gravitas and poise to get at the truth. You can't handle the truth. Yes, we can. We want to be the trusted advisor that can understand the total package. Well, Jim is all in, but Sally would rather quit than have this thing go. We need that kind of access to information in our vessel. These are the types of questions, perhaps a little bit more sort of sales debugging here. When you're thinking about your checklist and you're thinking, where am I on my Monopoly board? These are the types of questions that you want to ask yourself. Just like that medical doctor, there's a science of observation. And what's much more powerful than our perceptions is what are client-side activities, right? What are they actually doing? Sometimes we can have a bit of client-side hype because, man, they want that demo and they want that cost. But what sweat are they actually putting in? So be thinking about these kinds of questions as you're trying to orient on your checklist, and we'll dive into that next. To say, where are we on our Monopoly board? Just sort of briefly starting at the top here. We actually get to the point where we've got a written down sense of the problem, written down sense of the business objective. Did we get an aligned sense of all the things that we can do? Have we started to build some little prototypes and mock-ups? I'm not sure how deep folks get into that in the sales phase. I know that can take an investment. When you pitched and you walked people through the cost, how did that go? Was it positively received? Or was it, thanks a lot, send us a proposal? That's awesome, great, they want a proposal. Not necessarily someone who's buying and you reveal the cost. Most often, they'll provide an enthusiastic initial reaction. That's the number one moment, in my opinion. They hear dollars. We need to be sort of radars up, right? And lastly, did they actually say yes? They ask us to get started. Bobbitt's line would always say, we know it's a yes when they say, when can we get started? Those are the magic words. When can we get started? Because they can't wait any longer. They're dying to go there. Any questions about the checklist? And then if you've got a laptop, you can pop it up. I'll put it on the screen here. But any questions about this concept of, where are we in the journey? Orienting. Yeah, Chris.
There was a good one last night. Well, last one was about the MVP approach, right? So
Right.
like maybe they want a fixed cost approach, maybe they want MVP approach. So you can always vary your approach, right? It's not just one and done for one size fits all.
I think that's such a big part of this is knowing what our guardrails are, knowing what we do best, also in terms of our tech stack, but having that flexibility with it. Love it. Well, good. So let's dive into the checklist. That should be included in your session download materials here. Chris also can airdrop that right to you if you don't have it. That would be helpful. It is a FileMaker file that my teammate Sonia sent out. And cursor, there it is. And I'd encourage you just to go ahead and pick some sort of lead, some sort of project that's not quite started yet. That could be internal. It could also honestly just be personal or perhaps even made up. But if you're trying to get your college friends to go on a fun trip to Austin, Texas, we're all influencing all day, every day. So let's just take a minute. Just go through this checklist if you got the materials in a computer. And then I'm very curious if you have any questions about specific line items here. I can try to zoom that out perhaps one touch so you can kind of read a bit more for those who don't have it. Context here is these are specific, actionable points along a selling journey.
Talked about
Yeah.
being able to see success after implementing this, and you had seen a 2x return.
Yeah.
Are these kind of the metrics that you're using to gauge the before and after around that?
Really, it's not at a checklist level when I'm thinking about the 2x. And I would not say return, I would say conversion rate. So if we get a new lead in that is qualified, then that kind of goes into our CRM. And then, okay, game on. Of course, there's a lot of filtering that goes on throughout, that it might not be the right fit for us, might not be the right fit for the platform. And that's good. That brings the honesty in, bringing the truth. The sales checklist has been helpful for us in terms of, are we all on the same page? It can be hard, I think, to get true clarity on where you're at. Right? It might feel great, and you also get excited. Sometimes you even get excited about the ones that are super small or not the great fit. You can sort of talk yourself into anything. This is a bit more of an empirical step back. Are we doing all the things that we need to do? It's pre-flag, right? It's a checklist to go, oh, sheesh, yeah, wow. We jumped ahead, and they're so excited about telling us about all the things that they want to accomplish that I never really asked, how big is your business? That's a question I love to ask. How big is your business? Sometimes they'll answer in dollars, revenue per year. Sometimes they answer in employees. But I always really need to have a sense, because if we're having a conversation with a $10 million company, it's often vastly different in terms of the approval process with the 100. And folks going through the checklist here, or thinking of a sample lead? Yeah, Chris.
Is there a cutoff where you say, hey, I don't have enough items here, so that's a red flag? Like when I go through here, it's like my last call, I only had half of these.
Absolutely. I think we're always considering, particularly if you're in the position of sales leadership, you're considering incremental investment. And your sales folks are coming to you and say, may I have more, please? And so for those folks that are in the room that are in that position often, absolutely, Chris, is that if this list isn't really filling up, and often it can't fill up because they're not sharing or they're not showing or they're not putting in homework, then that's how personally I measure our investment. If someone's all in with us and they're putting in the homework and they're sharing the information and they've got a significant problem or pain point, I'm happy to spend another call. Let's keep going, right? Even we're seeing our sales costs start to stack, and that's something to be measured for sure. But I'd rather put in some extra sweat, someone else who's sweating. Let's get after it. Even if we start building a few things, and even if it ends up going nowhere, it's so much different than trying to chase something where we just don't seem to be able to get answers to the question. Yes.
Last on the walk. Go back up to one that socialized the problem.
Stakeholders. Yeah, so that's a little small there, just so that way
that's fine.
We can see a lot of stuff. So I'll show you a specific example of this. One of the things that we do is often you might not have the full team in the room for every conversation. So at the very least, I want to help that organization socialize what we've all discussed amongst themselves. Now that can be a little tricky because you don't want to have person A say, hey, you overshared information that was not ready there. So we kind of strip it down a little bit. Maybe we don't put the most juicy details there. There's no gossip in there. But also, yeah, if we had a serious selling conversation, and you told me these are the other players, they're on CC. Here's what we discussed today. I like to think of four, and we'll get to this in slides here in a second. I like to think of these kind of four basic steps, which might happen sometimes out of order, having 4 chaser emails that go out. And that's my way of helping that organization sort of socialize the pain point. Great. Any other questions on this? Did folks, do you start to see your 4 little buckets kind of start to fill up here? Okay, this kind of actually a fun one here. It's a little kind of, what do they call it? It's sort of a stacked column chart. I sent it to Sonia. I was like, I don't know how to do that, so go for it. Pretty cool. It's fun to see. Your buckets should fill up if you're kind of completing your checklist there. And that'll give you some visual sense of kind of where you stand on the roadmap. All right, let's keep going. I mentioned this earlier. Our ability to read the room, even though we're an introvert, I think it's a key skill, and I think it's also a great life skill. Right? I do like to think that developing some of these skills is helpful in other areas of life. here's just a few fun examples that kind of if you're on step one and you start to hop straight in about the effort and the cost, you can kind of move someone too quickly and they can get that yuck factor. If you're on step four, you're really late stages and you belabor the whole thing, right? We've all been on that call of like, hey, there's no enterprise price. You've got to walk through our presentations. It sort of belabors you as an engineer. But again, we kind of have to fit our process to those that are in the room with us. If you're on step three and you're trying to close with step four, but we're still not really clear that we love the solution, we love the price, it's really hard to go ahead and get that approval through the whole organization unless the key stakeholders are really going to champion it, unless they're excited. And this is a classic. Last one here is classic. That late stages, the executive walks in the room and says the classic words, "What problem are we trying to solve here?" Anyone ever heard that one? Oh, it's a gut punch. It's what they're really saying is, I don't trust any of you. You're wasting money, wasting time. You didn't ground this in a business objective. You're tinkering. So you really, you feel like you're on, the last part of the Monopoly board and you are back to step one. Now, hopefully, you can quickly bridge and bring it right back. A few other gotchas just in terms of like discerning where we're at. This is my favorite is at the top, is I asked for their documents. Well, they didn't send anything yet, but they're all in. Anyone ever experienced that? Is, hey, we're doing all this stuff, we're working in Excel, and I can walk you through all this, and they're giving you a screen share, and oh man, hey, if you'd after the meeting just go ahead and send that to me, one single email. That's all I'm asking for. Send me that Excel document, and then I can help make magic. I can start to craft a little mock-up or a little demo based on that. But boy, they never sent it. So their activities, picturing that medical doctor who's going to be doing an exam, who's going to be taking blood and these other sorts of things, running them through these tests, their actions tell us the most. Sometimes I don't artificially play any games at all. Truthfully, very straightforward and truthful in these conversations because I'm a bit more of an engineer nerd. But if they want a demo right away, a demo of what? Right? A demo of what? I can show you all sorts of shiny coins, whiz bang. But the best demos, they start with the pain again. Very briefly, not belabored, artistically. Often if I'm going to give a demo, I want to be grounded in their own problem statement. Here's your current way of working. You're in Excel, and then you got to go double enter that into this old clunky SAP system. Ouch. And that translates to a certain lack of efficiency. It translates to, lost opportunity. Ooh, here's your bright welcome to your new world, right? So we can't ground it in pain if they're asking for a demo on call one. That's just sort of like, window dressing or something. It's too early. Same thing about costs. It's really difficult. I don't know any silver bullet to this. I'll be interested to discuss and learn with y'all. But it can be really difficult to have someone just call you and say, hey, what's the cost for this? Just give me a quote. But we're not vendors, we're partners. And we're not vending machines either, right? That's the old saying is we don't want to be in a race to the bottom because we just might win. We don't want to be a commodity. We want to be a partner. So that takes a certain gravitas to delay that conversation about cost. Also, if someone calls me about great new cool innovations, perhaps I can listen a little bit more and I'll start to hear about some things like inefficiency. Perhaps I'll listen a little bit more and then I'll start to hear like risks. And what I've memorized is that risks sell. The CFO will sign off on risk mitigation, right? We failed our audit last year, so we had to bring in a third party. Now we're talking. Let's go. I can solve that. Tell me exactly why you failed your audit. Let's get out ahead of that one for next year. Someone comes in and they say, oh, God, I heard Claris does this, this, and this. Yes, it does. We will get there. We will get there. Let's do all of that too. And I'm glad that you're amped up and you're excited. Also, tell me about what risks we're going to solve. Great. So we're going to get into some details here now. We're going to move fairly quickly through these. You'll have all the slides. We're going to get into problem solving first. Yeah.
Maybe one thing to supplement that last
Yeah,
slide
please.
is I don't know is a great response. How much is this going to cost? I don't know. What's this going to look like to the end users? I have no idea. I haven't talked to your end users yet.
Yes.
And like that actually shows like it feels like you're putting yourself out there in a vulnerable way, but that actually builds trust. And that kind of it reinforces that, or I should say, it combats against that worry that this guy's just trying to get money from me, so he's going to give me all the answers I want to hear.
Absolutely.
But if you're like, I have no way of knowing what your solution is going to look like.
Yes.
They're like, okay, fair.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's trusted advisor stuff. Sometimes your doctor will say, well, we're not quite sure what's going on here yet, but we're going to run a few tests. You don't think less of them. That's the scientific method. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, four deep slides here. We'll move fairly quickly between these. Confirming the pain points, getting into the budget, asking early on and often, do you have a budget? That's an okay question to ask right at the outset. It may be slightly awkward, but it's a 5 seconds of awkwardness, and most times they'll start to share something about that. I'd like to also capture a few handy-dandy metrics. I'll show you this value assessment where we got really deep with a couple of customers who really wanted us to do that, and they helped build it themselves as well. I find even a handful of key metrics can be helpful. How big is the business? What problem are we trying to solve? 2 or 3 numbers are key. If you don't have 2 or 3 numbers and 2 or 3 quotes, you may not be able to really advance really well and to be durable for the long haul. I'll literally capture our customers' quotes and I'll send them to it. Often on a selling conversation, I have a screen share up and I'm in my email, in Mac Mail, and I'm typing. So they can see that it's sort of like a deposition. I'm intaking and your words matter a lot to me. And then I'm going to send them to you. Now, again, no gossip if there's okay, that's on the side here, but let's capture this plan right from the outset. My dad was a lawyer and he told me, that yellow legal pad and a pen and locked in a conversation is how you do a deposition. I really do feel it's somewhat similar. And then again, I'll chase with an email. It'll often look something like this. Short and sweet up front. Again, we can't belabor it all. I know you're not actually going to read all of this, but it's important that you know that I've got it. Even if they never read a word of it, it's important to know, for them to know that I've got it. Okay? Outlining our mission, outlining our business objective, a couple key quotes, getting into the detail of the problem. This is our value assessment. Again, I've got this Excel doc, and Sonia had some fun and built it into a FileMaker application as well. Those risks I like to put right up front. Those, I believe, are the most powerful selling types of things. And I just tried to flesh out something, and maybe this is a touch theoretical. Bob warned me that, hey, I don't love when people ROI me in a sales conversation about tech. We're going to save you $1 gajillion if you just spend half $1 gajillion with us. And it can sort of look like funny math. But we have had several times where those conversations particularly about efficiency, that's probably one of the easiest ones. I'm not sure if you all have experienced that. Well, how many staff are we talking about that's in your customer service department? And man, they take 5 hours right now to capture an order. Holy cow. So if we could get that down to 30 minutes, those kind of just ballpark metrics. I'm not a management consultant. Right? I'm not your CFO. I'm not going to be there with a stopwatch at the end of the day. But let's get somewhat tangible about what we're talking about. How many of you currently will get into some of those metrics and some of those details on the business objective? Yeah. How deep do you go? Like, this is probably a bit overboard.
Not
It's a bit overboard, but I think it's a sort of a useful thing because we can be thinking about these things in terms of actual math. Anything that we're actually going to do can show up. Again, that's a fun FileMaker file that's included. with your materials here. If you like it, have some fun with it. It's pretty simple. You know, at the end of the day, what are we actually saying that we're going to achieve if we're successful in terms of business objectives?
I think one of the most fun
Yes,
metrics I've found doing these kinds of exercises was there was a woman who had to spend her first 15 minutes of every morning doing this repetitive task.
Yeah.
And then the question was like, golly, what would it be like to have those 15 minutes back every day, right? And not even a price tag around it, but just to know that there is a measurable, non-measurable thing that's out there
Absolutely.
can be a really nice like mark of success. Did we accomplish it? Like, do you have your mornings back? And then that's a really cool, like, feel good for everybody at the end of the end of the project.
Executive time redirected to to more valuable activity.
Yep.
Right? You got to go in and pull your own KPIs on every Monday, and it's not an ROI thing.
No.
Yet it's real, right? Love it. Yes.
What she just said, generationally, it is also impacted. If you are approaching a boomer, what you have on the screen is very effective. That it's the traditional ROI, more productivity, higher gains, better work from our existing staff. When you're talking with a millennial, getting home early, spending more time with your family, quality of life, that resonates more.
Love that. Love that. And I love boomers too. Mention this, asking bold questions. Be fearless with this. We can't be turning the screws. We're not playing games. We're curious. Above all, I can't remember which one of my mentors said, we don't need your enthusiasm. We need your curiosity and your confidence. Right? So we can be engineers about this stuff. We do want to smoke out those hard questions. What else are you guys working on these days? What else do you guys have going on around here these days? Right? Understanding, okay, wow, they've got this whole new building, this whole new thing that they're doing. But that kind of circumstantial evidence can really help you late stages. Key element here, as we're moving into a second step, is that we want to briefly ground the second step and the first step. I do like to reiterate, remind them, hey, I'll get us kicked off here today. Last time what we talked about was boom, boom, boom. Here are the key takeaways. They need to know that we've remembered that and that we're journeying that forward. Every meeting, I believe, should end with the next meeting booked. How many of us do that? Before you get off that call, have to book that next meeting. Can't do the calendar stuff after the meeting ends. Stephen used to say, what we're really discussing today is whether we need another discussion or not. That's what we're talking about. Is it worth all of our time? Do this again for 60 or 90. I'll leave all this with you. I do love when you can get someone talking and sharing an up to their whiteboard during this part. If they can have a screen share up now, if they're walking you through their old Excel documents or their old Oracle thing that they've got to double enter into, now we're really going. Step 3, reiterate step 1 and 2 briefly, right? This is the problem. These are the types of solutions we're considering, and now I'm here to pitch. A great book called Pitch Anything. I'll leave you a link for that. And yeah, teammate Jason has worked his way through that too, which is awesome. We need to pitch our ideas based on their ideas. It's sort of like, we don't need to be the hero that comes up with the solution. If it's your idea and I can quote you, all I'm trying to do is build you up. I want to build you up in terms of your career advancement too, right? That you've championed this thing and I need you in order to be successful. We want to pitch what's based on what they have said is most important. And of course, we're also pitching to our strengths. We've talked about 10 different things. 5 of them are a great fit for Claris. 3 of those are also a great fit for Kiza. Let's go. That's what we would like to start with. And there is a little magic in there, I believe, that you can kind of steer the ship to the open waters. Also like to try to start to give it a slogan or give it a name, right? Have a bit of fun with that and start to name the system, right? We want to start to name the system something other than the new system. Lastly, gaining approval. Little step 1, little step 2, little step 3. That executive's in the room now. Not going to belabor it. Got my notes up, and we're going to ground the conversation in our business objective again. Briefly, a couple of key metrics, a couple of key quotes. We considered these alternatives. We picked a winner, and now we're just trying to figure out how to get started. This is sometimes where an engineer like me can have this perfect is the enemy of good thing. I don't know if you've ever had this where you're late stages and it starts to change and starts to evolve. And we even had it during when we were purchasing a home, and our realtor had to be there to kind of grab me by the arm and say, "This is a good deal. This is a good house. I know there's a couple things in here that we don't love, but let's not blow it up. Not blow it up at the end because darn it, it's not exactly the way that I wanted it." Yes.
What do you do if you get to the end, so talk costs, amounts, whatever, and executive says, "Well, you do better than that." What do you do then?
For me, and I'll let others weigh in on that, the answer is always related to scope. Is yes. We want to build up a series of yeses in a sales conversation. Heard it takes 7. So we're asking questions, and we also have to be ready with the yes. And so the answer is yes, but it's always trade-offs. Because I'm your doctor. I'm not a drug dealer. Right? I'm your trusted advisor. And so there's no haggling in my personal opinion. Not sure how others have dealt with that.
Well, I think that ties in with what I asked about. Can I go to a MVP, right? Minimum viable product, right? Can I narrow the scope and get started faster?
I would much rather not charge for my time than discount my services. Because I used to be a classical singer, for example, right? And I asked the conductor at the Lyric Opera of Chicago a bold question. Hey, could we do a couple of coachings together? And you know what? He said, yes. It was unbelievable. But was he going to take my money? Heck no. Need $300 an hour or whatever. That would have actually devalued his time to take my money. Also, it gives him all the authority. It gives him all the power. So if we're in true gridlock, I'd rather go spend those 5-10 minutes. Love that, Chris. Maybe, and this is something I believe that we used to do at Soliant, maybe I would say, hey, how about this? Those 3 words are very powerful words that pitch anything. How about this? You're putting some tension in the room, making a proposal. How about this? What if we meet in the middle and I'll start keeping track of my time. We'll start with an MVP. If you don't like it, that's okay. We'll pause there. If you like it, then we'll get started. And the implication is you will end up paying me for the time. Does that make sense? You kind of still sort of maintain some of that professionalism without discount. Awesome. My wife reminds me of this one a lot. Sometimes I say, man, I've got this engagement. It's fantastic. I feel like I should step in there and help lead that or get that across the line. Or I could go have a selling conversation. I don't know if, particularly for you and you who are running your own shop, you may feel that pull. Selling is non-billable. Billing hours is billable. And my wife always reminds me, doing good work is sales. Our best source of new work is our existing customers. If you put on that extra coat of paint, show a little extra love, and you make that solution excellent, you are generating new business. Sales is simply consulting before you're getting paid. So we just want to be in our consultant mindset. And lastly, it's just a reminder to be extracting lessons learned after every meeting. Believe having that mindset of let's continuously improve. Wow, amazing what you can accomplish one step at a time. You commit to continuing to improve your sales engine, that flywheel is going to turn, and you're going to see that acceleration take place. I mentioned a few of these. Proactive selling by Skip Miller. I know that's a Claire's favorite. Referral engine, trusted advisor. I like that podcast too. And that's what I've got for you today. Thank you very much. Feel so alive this week. feel super energized. The biggest reason of which is I love doing this. So please, if you would give me the opportunity to do it again, fill out the feedback form. Come chat with me too if you've got some ways that I can improve. This is a passion area of mine. Give me a glowing review, and that I would appreciate that very much. And let's chat, let's connect. Thank you so much.